bike lane. If you add up all of these accidents in line with the sidewalk, 74% of all collisions in line with the sidewalk. If you want to improve safety for cyclists, pedestrians, car drivers, the best place to have those cyclists is on a bike lane. And that is one of the goals of that redesign. So, what kind of effect might that project do, based off of what I understand? If you look at a bike commuter, this is from the Federal Highway Transportation, or Highway Administration. They say, highly confident, somewhat confident cyclists. This is me. I'm straddling that line. At best, 15% of the people that would have some interest in cycling would use a street of our configuration. If you have a better block kind of configuration, you can capture about 75% of it. The key things to see on here is describing Wichita cyclists, what we see here. If you don't give them separated bike facilities, protected bike lanes, they may not ride a bike at all, or if they do, ride on the side. That's exactly what we're seeing. So what I'm seeing in Wichita fits what the Federal Highway Administration says you should expect. So the worst case scenario to me as a counter argument is what's the worst that could happen by approving that project? I'm going to lose a few $1,000s. And if zero cyclists, zero scooters, zero electric wheelchairs use those lanes, what you still end up with is a street that's narrower, that will slow down traffic. You'll end up with a safer street that during that project will keep the wear and tear off that street while it's in effect. That to me is the worst case scenario.
Thank you, Clayton.
Questions? I know I went through a lot of material.
So you know, I know I'm familiar with the Douglas, but then you talked about another project.
Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Cindy, but there's three main projects that are kind of connected. There was originally a Douglas Design District street redesign, Washington to Hillside. There was from the river to Washington. And then this Better Blocks is its own project. That's a temporary. The first two I mentioned are permanent installs. This one is temporary. And that's from the bridge to, last I heard, that was Maine.
Yeah, it might go to the river, but to Maine. I think Maine to BNSF.
So the first two projects I mentioned has kind of blended a little bit. For example, on the permanent things they're talking about now is the river to Hillside. Technically, originally it was going to just be downtown. Now they're talking about extending it. But those are permanent installs. The ones you've heard in the news lately, particularly the Eagle, where they're talking about repainting, that's for 6 months. And so part of the value to that, to me, is you do a one and done install. That's more expensive and it's harder to back out. And we have zero data because it's never existed here. And so part of the appeal to me is, okay, throw a few $1,000s at it. If you make mistakes, so what? It's going to be gone when the paint's gone. Now when you put in that multi-million-dollar project, now you have data to say, okay, that was a mistake, but this was a
Any other questions for Clayton?
Yes.
Is there data from other towns and cities that have done this that we can use in trying to convince individuals?
Just make sure I don't go around your question.
Yeah.
In what direction are you taking?
Well, from what I understand, you're saying there's not any data for us as far as putting in the painted bike lanes and the impact that would have.
Okay. Okay. The
But is
impact on
there
ridership.
data but is there data in other cities where they have had the painted?
Yes,
Reduced? Okay.
there's all sorts of data.
Okay.
As of late, maybe your most famous example would be New York City. They started going through a massive transformation about 10 years ago, and as soon as they put in the lanes, they just flooded. Matter of fact, some of their pedestrian zones, they had people taking over the pedestrian zones as they were constructing. They were in that much demand. Granted, New York City is a little different, it's denser, you're fighting for space over there, so maybe some of those effects might be amplified. But consistently from a ridership level, regardless if you're talking about scooters, bikes, or people just walking around, those lanes and similar infrastructure, safety almost always improves, traffic speeds usually go down. And from my perspective, it actually, in a sense, increases congestion, because if you measure traffic only by car, cars don't fit very many people, especially when they're moving 30, 40 miles an hour. So open streets, 40,000 people. Imagine trying to fit 40,000 cars on Douglas Street. There's just not the physical space. So if you redefine traffic as people, as counting people instead of counting cars, you actually increase traffic.
Anything else? Thank you, Clayton. Appreciate it. All right. Anybody not here to speak? Okay. All right. We are ready then for our agenda item, Logan Bradshaw.
Well, handouts out, so you guys can just pass, take one, pass it down. And then is there a clicker or should I stand back here?
I didn't get the clicker from the library, so I
No,
think
it's
you're
fine, it's
gonna have
fine.
to sit up there. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. I'll let you guys get this class out and then I'll start. Okay, so my name's Logan Bradshaw, and I'm a management analyst with the Department of Housing and Community Services, the Community Investments Division. And the first agenda item that we have for you is the 2020-2021 HUD Consolidated Second Program Action Plan. So, as you guys might know, the city of Wichita is considered an entitlement city under the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so what that means is based on our population, poverty level, area median income, et cetera, we are guaranteed to get funding streams from HUD each year. And I come to the Department of Housing and Community Services. And what these funds are intended to do is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities, as well as affordable housing for all residents. Each of the funded activities align to the city's goal of creating a livable as well as a sustainable community. The three funding streams that we receive each year are the Community Development Block Grant Program, or the CDBG program. This is by far our most flexible funding source. It can be used for a wide range of community development needs. In 2019-2020, which is our current program year, we received around $2.8 million. The next funding stream is our Home Investment Partnerships program. This is used to create affordable housing for low-income households. We received around $1.3 million for this program year. And then we have the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, which is used to address homelessness in the Wichita area. And we received close to $240,000 for this current program year. We'll dive a little bit deeper into what each of these funding streams do and what we've spent money on, including these funding streams in a few more slides. But first we'll talk about our planning process. So every 5 years we are tasked with creating a consolidated plan. And you can kind of think of this as the long-term strategic 5-year plan for our CDBG home and ESG funding. And each year within the 5-year period, we're tasked with creating a program year action plan. And this is where we really drill down and say, this is what our plans are for the upcoming program year. Currently, we're on the 2nd year of our 5-year plan. That 5-year plan is running from 2019 to 2023. And our plan for the 2nd program year action year is 2020 to 2021, and it's due to HUD on May 15th of 2020 and allocates funds for the period of July 1st through June 30th of those years. To give you an idea of our timeline really starts tonight with going to the district advisory boards to gather public input. And we'll be gathering public input through February of 2020 in an attempt to develop an annual action plan that we can then push through the city council and the appropriate channels. In 2019, we'll kind of take in December of 2019, we'll take our next step, which will be the appointment of the Grants Review Committee that reviews spending allocations from an RFP process that we'll talk a little bit more in just a few moments, as well as issue the request for proposals for our various funding streams. In February of next year, the Grants Review Committee will review the proposal and make funding recommendations. And one of the handouts that you received tonight is the Grants Review Committee schedule. And one of the things that are technically, I guess, our second agenda item that we're doing tonight is we're going to be seeking a Grants Review Committee nominee from the District Advisory Board. Also in February, after the Grants Review Committee reviews and makes the funding recommendations, staff will get to work on developing a preliminary spending plan for the 3 grant streams. In March, we'll go to the City Council to hopefully authorize opening a 30-day comment period for our 2nd year annual action plan, and then in May, the council will then approve the the final spending plan, and then we will submit our plan to HUD in May as well. And then July of 2020, the program year will begin. So the first grant stream that we'll talk about is the Community Development Block Grant Program, or the CDBG program. In order to be a CDBG eligible activity, it has to meet one of the 3 national objectives. So it either has to benefit a low to moderate income person or area, prevent slum or blight, and address urgent community needs. By far, the majority of the activities that we do the first, which is benefiting low to moderate income persons or areas. A few other things to consider with the CDBG program. There is a limit on the public services category of the funding. HUD usually caps this at about 15%, but we were grandfathered in at the highest amount that we had ever been allocated, and so currently our cap is $1.1 million. Some of the things we fund with the public services category is the Office of Community Services staff, domestic violence shelter services, as well as youth crime prevention and enrichment, as well as a couple other things, but those take up the lion's share of our public services category. We can only use funds if we have an MOU with another city department, for example, infrastructure with Public Works, or park improvements with the Park Department, or if we go through the formal RFP process for contractual service with private vendors, which are our nonprofits and other subrecipients. And obviously, we can't allocate funds to a provider if those funds are to be used for an ineligible purpose. So the next 2 slides will just show you some of the things that we've done with CDBG funds in the past. Infrastructure and park improvements in low to moderate income neighborhoods or opportunity zones. The last District 6 project that we did for infrastructure improvements was the Market and Topeka Bike Path, and that was for approximately $300,000. We also recently rolled out a new facade improvement program approved by the City Council for this last program year. We haven't expended any funds under this program. It's kind of like a pilot. We might be able to expand it in upcoming years, depending on how it's used, but it's used to supplement the current facade improvement program that the Office of Economic Development oversees, but that program has some pretty strict requirements, and so we're hopefully able to assist more businesses with this facade improvement program. We also do the home repair program, which in the last program year, the 2018-2019, we were able to assist 179 households through that program. We allocate dollars to the metropolitan area building and construction department for demolition and clearance of unsafe structures that could occur in low to moderate income areas. Like I said, we fund the Office of Community Services Districts 1, 3, and then also District 6 for the community services representatives in those districts. We operate the Housing First program, project coordinator with CDBG dollars, and we do a couple of other homelessness assistance activities through CDBG funds as well. The last program year, we were able to assist 813 clients of across Catholic Charities, Harbor House, Stepstone, and Wichita Family Crisis Centers, cumulatively through our domestic violence shelter services program funding, as well as close to 4,000 youth through the Youth Crime Prevention and Enrichment activities with the YMCA, Kansas Big Brothers Big Sisters, and the Mental Health Association. That was our program year 2018-2019. We actually have a new organization that we're funding with Youth Crime Prevention and Enrichment for the current program year, and that's Real Men, Real Heroes, if you're familiar with that organization. Lastly, we also fund training and employment programs through our Way to Work Youth Employment Program. That's a program that our department administers in-house through our Wichita-Sedgwick County Community Action Partnership Program, and it benefits low to moderate income youth across the Wichita community that and provides them with job training and then the summer internships. The next grant stream that we'll talk about is our Home Investment Partnerships Program. In the last program year, we were able to assist 22 families with down payment and closing cost assistance through our home ownership activities section of the home program. We were also able to assist 18 units of housing development and or redevelopment through our development and redevelopment activities. We'll talk a little bit about community housing development organizations and what those organizations do and how you become a community housing development organization, or rather how you would qualify to be one in an upcoming slide, where we also provide operating support funding for those community housing development organizations. Some of those organizations that you might be familiar with are Mennonite Housing, Power CDC, and Jacob's Ladder. The community housing development set aside funding. We issue applications each year for those organizations, and that funding has to be used for the development of affordable housing. Community housing development organizations, their sole purpose has to be for the development of affordable housing. They have to have capacity and experience, and they also have to have legal and tax exempt status, along with some of the other things listed on this slide. The last funding stream that we'll talk about is our Emergency Solutions, formerly known as our Emergency Shelter Grant Program. You can kind of think of this grant broken down into homelessness assistance or direct support to homeless shelters in the Wichita area. And then the other side of that is the homeless prevention aspect. We also do our rapid rehousing program through the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, which can provide rent and utilities assistance, as well as housing placement to those who might be at threat or at risk of becoming homeless. And then we do our Homeless Management Information System. It's kind of like a database of homeless persons that typically are located where they've received services in the past from. It's a requirement of HUD to administer or to have someone in the community that administers the HMIS, and we actually contract out with the United Way that provides that service for us. Here are some eligible costs that can be incurred under each of the shelter services and then the homeless prevention categories. Some of the organizations that we funded in the past for the shelter services are like United Methodist Open Door, Catholic Charities, as well as Interfaith Ministries. And then on the prevention side, we funded Salvation Army as well as Center of Hope. And so now we'll kind of pitch the discussion over to you guys to see what types of activities you'd like to see prioritized for the upcoming program year. So which activities are of your highest priority, which ones are of lowest. If our allocation was to increase or decrease in the upcoming year, which activities would you like to see prioritized over one another? Yes.
So back on the CDBG, what data is available to inform us how these items worked out? So the money that was used for them, how does one measure, or how does one look at this was a successful place to put money?
Oh, that's a really good question. So on your, you mean like our subrecipients through domestic violence shelters, or you mean like any?
You know, from the perspective, park improvement, how did that work out? What was the data? Home repair program, what were some of the things that went on there that say, yes, this was good, or along those lines? Because one of the things that's been really difficult for me over the years in putting priorities to what you need, it's almost been handed over. I mean, I haven't been able to say, yeah, this is a good thing because here's the data that says this was a good thing, or this was okay, but it's needed, so yes, we need to continue.
Sure.
Can I add to that? So like when you sit on the CSBG or the CDBG committees, we talk about like where we put the money last year and what we used it for, and if it was successful or not, and we use that data to decide where to put the money this year. That's, I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's just, you just haven't seen it.
Sure. So we typically don't bring that type of data to the district advisory boards. If we were to do that, this would be a great avenue to do that. We could definitely provide some statistics on, like for example, when we request for proposals for the domestic violence shelter services and youth crime prevention and enrichment, we ask people, okay, what are your goals? What are your performance outcomes? How are you going to measure those outcomes, and vice versa? And so what we do when we do allocate funds to that agency, they're required to fill out accomplishment reports every time they request a reimbursement. And so we can see how, like, are they actually being successful in getting your program off the ground? What challenges are you having? Or what types of successes are you having? How many additional youth came through this program in this month? If your shelter numbers are lower than what you expected them to be, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but explain to us why. Like, what type of trends are we starting to see in that capacity? We also are required by HUD to submit what we call a CAPER each year, which is a consolidated annual performance and action report, I believe. I'm not sure if I'm getting that acronym right. We have so many. But basically, it's how we are monitoring the subrecipients of the funds, what type of outcomes do they have. And that CAPER goes to the city council at the beginning, or end of summer, beginning of spring, end of summer, beginning of fall. So that's definitely another document that we have that is specifically related to reporting on outcomes for the previous program year.
Yeah, so when you go into us asking us what do we see as priorities, that would be very useful in helping us. And so I don't see that. I mean, once again, my priorities are not based necessarily on facts, other than my own observations from talking with other people, but not seeing that. So that's a takeaway from the conversation. It's meant not to be any more.
Great. Definitely make note of that.
So like basically you're just asking us what our personal feelings are about programs and which ones we would like, which ones we like or don't like.
Sure, or if there's a need that we haven't discussed that we've spent federal dollars on, if you guys know of another need that's emerging in your communities, that would be something for us to take note of so that we can prioritize it for the upcoming funding year. Or like one thing that we talk a lot about for the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, some of the other district advisory boards is some people want to see more funding going towards homeless prevention. That would mean taking funding away from the shelter services aspect of it, but then it would be reapportioning funding for the prevention aspect.
So go back to your questions for them.
Yeah, sure.
So they can.
And then one more thing to add to that is at the grants review committee process, we kind of do progress report cards on the programs. So measuring what their actual outcomes were for the previous program year and what they expected them to be. And so that way, that when they're allocating, they're deciding how they want to see the youth crime prevention and enrichment and the domestic violence shelter services, as well as the home program and the emergency solutions grant, we can kind of measure it against what they said they were going to do and then how successful the program was.
And Logan, this sheet that we've got,
Yes.
it has not exactly what Craig is asking for, but it does have some how dollars were spent and how many people were served, right?
Yes. And actually, I gave my copy out too, but yes, it does. It has across the funding we've totaled it, not just for each agency that we've allocated funds to, but in some. So with youth crime prevention and enrichment, where it says about 3,900 people, that's across the Mental Health Association, Kansas Big Brothers Big Sisters, and the YMCA. Domestic violence shelter services against the 3 agencies that we allocated out for that as well.
So those reports that you're collecting from the people who you're funding, are those public or those?
So technically they are public documents because we review them at the grants review committee process, and those are all public hearings, so anyone can attend those meetings.
But it's not like online. You could go and look at.
No, we don't post the monthly accomplishment reports online. In the CAPER, you would see the consolidated the performance report that we have to do each year. You would see each of those broken down into the different categories.
They're a pretty in-depth report, I think.
It is. It's pretty, yeah, not the most fun read, but everything's in there. It tells you what our goal was for a specific category, how much we met, and then the percentage that we are able to accomplish.
So you want to know what our priority are, our opinion of a priority.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start. Let's see if I'm going in the right
You
direction.
just go for it.
Okay, okay, I'm gonna start. I'd like to continue with the bike lane downtown area. And also I would like to see barriers at each of the main intersections in downtown. We have barriers by the YMCA, but I think that's the only one.
You're talking about barriers between the bike lanes and the car lanes?
Yes, to where the cars are not pulling into the bike lane when they want to make a right turn or a left turn. There's a big problem with that right now. And the other thing is mental health. We have a big lack of mental health services for our people. How we can specifically address that, I don't have an answer. But somehow maybe you folks might have something.
Sure. Yeah, let's read on that.
Something I'll mention while they're thinking about this. When Logan talks about the community services, Office of Community Services, that is your neighborhood center. So that's Anna and Sarah and the center that they run, and then also for District 1, Atwater, and District 3, Colvin. So those, I want to make sure you understand what that was, so that if you would like to advocate for that.
Yeah,
But that all, that's, you mean like the Evergreen over here, you mean like, so that's all comes out of the CSBG committee though, right? And the,
CDBG.
is that CD? Because,
It's a little bit different. CSBG is what you're thinking about, is Health and Human Services, which are,
Community Services Block Grant Committee?
yeah.
Yeah, we advocated money to the, neighborhood
Yes,
things,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
all the time,
Center.
yeah.
yes.
Because I was,
But the actual funding for our positions, our 2 positions in that facility come from CDBG, right?
Yes, they do.
Oh, definitely.
And that's why the public services grandfather is so important, because if we were capped at what the 15% or what HUD recently, it wasn't recently, it was actually quite some time ago. But if we hadn't been grandfathered in, then we would, like domestic violence shelter services, as well as the Office of Community Services, as well as youth crime prevention and enrichment, those all are under that public services area. So if we weren't grandfathered in at that high amount, then we would have to make some pretty tough decisions.
Is there any historical understanding of what is a high priority during an economic downturn?
I don't believe that's anything that we've talked about since I've been with the city. That doesn't mean it hasn't occurred. But in terms of like urgent community need, which is one of the national objectives for the CDBG program, that's actually like those are natural disaster type situations that would qualify an activity. But those activities would still take away from our grant amount. It's not like we would get extra money coming in for the CDBG program. We could get it from other areas, but I don't believe that's anything we've talked about while I've worked for the city, but that doesn't mean that those conversations can't take place.
my guess would be domestic violence shelters,
Oh, yeah.
because
I-
guys tend to drink a little more and get a little bit angry when they
Yes,
don't have money.
yes.
Yeah, why do you think you see one coming?
People talk so hard about it happening, it just might.
Dude, we're past the time for it.
Yes.
Government's propping this economy up. It's not gonna last forever, but that's another one.
But that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, and that's trying to forecast though. I see where you're going, but that's forecasting.
So this homeless prevention for the emergency management, is a rent utility, is that all you can use that for prevention, or is that just an example of what you can use?
That's the line, that takes the lion's share of our homeless
So you
prevention.
can use it for other,
Yes.
you could do other things besides just.
Yes, and some of our subrecipients on that are Salvation Army and Center of Hope. So if they engage in homeless prevention activities, there are various things that they can do with that funding, like maybe support staff salaries or supplies, things like that. As long as they're assisting and continually producing homeless prevention outcomes, then they can use that funding for different things as well. But most commonly, it's used for rent utilities assistance.
So how do they distribute money to the different parks? Is it just the size of the park or the neighborhood the park's in?
So one more time.
How do they determine how much money, because it has like park improvements, Glendale Park improvements, and that's the park over on Westside and 25th, right? Because and just coincidentally, I was running through there the other day, and I was thinking about how ratty that looks. Like it's not very well taken care of. And then I was thinking, I wonder why that is. Well, but I'm wondering when you have all these like $50,000 there, Friendship Park, how they determine how much money goes to which park? Is it the size of the park or is it the area that the park's in?
It's not necessarily. So the park improvements and infrastructure improvements are not items that go through the grants review committee process. They are determined by the city council, so it's really about the city council district and advocating for why those park improvements are needed, what they are, and then getting them involved, included in our 5-year plan. In terms of the locations of the park, they do have to be in low to moderate income census tracts. If they're not, they wouldn't be eligible for these programs. And oftentimes, you've mentioned you're running through there recently and it looked kind of ratty. These are only can be used for capital projects, so the ongoing maintenance of the park is still up to the park department.
Okay.
You know, some light in South Wichita, it's outside of our district. But we bicycle by it all the time, but it's near George Washington Boulevard and Oliver. There's the old, it connects to the park. It's the old soapbox derby hill. And a lot of people use that for exercising and bicycling, you know, getting training on hills and such. Right now, that is very ratty. And that when we're there, I think of how pretty that could be used as a dumping ground right now. There's a pretty little creek there. And I think that could be a great improvement down there.
And so what would that come under? I mean, what would that come
Would that
from?
be capital improvement? Because, you know, the fencing needs to be improved.
Infrastructure and park.
If the area you're talking about belongs to the city of Wichita, it does.
I think it does.
Yeah, I'm sure.
If
And
it's
it's
a park,
down in
it could be a
Plain,
park improvement. Oh, it's in
it's
Plainview.
in the
Whose district is that in?
Clendenin's.
Oh, no wonder. Maybe somebody should do something about it. Talk to him.
But it is, it's fancy.
Yeah, it could be, I'm not specifically familiar with the area, but it could fall under infrastructure or park improvements.
That's a really good idea, Denise.
Are there places in District 6 that are eligible for
I've driven by there.
not obviously, but I noticed there's not very many District 6 on here, so does that mean that there's not a lot of eligible places?
No, that's quite the opposite. Most of District 6 is in a low to moderate income census area, except for a few parts of Riverside, and then over by Orchard Park, there's an area that isn't. But we brought a map last time because it was for the consolidated planning process. Usually we don't include a map in this PowerPoint, but I can send a map to Anna, and then you guys can see the eligible areas. And she can.
We have such a good council person in our district that it's really together. It's the rest of the city that needs help.
I actually think there's probably more needs than the money we have. That's what it is.
So what I'd like to do is provide you feedback as to relatively higher level. So CDBG public services would be one highest priority. 2 would be emergency solutions grant. 3, CDBG home repair. 4, home program. And 5th would be infrastructure park fund. And that would be for the coming year of 2020 through 2020.
Yes.
So CDBG, when you say that, that follows under both public services, which include domestic violence shelters and infrastructure and park projects?
So
Is that what you meant?
Well, I took each of the 5 categories and just put them and gave them a priority.
Where did you put public services? Oh, okay,
Number 1.
okay.
And what was your number 2?
Number 2 was emergency solutions.
Okay. Number 3?
Home repair.
Okay.
Number 4 was home program.
You put parks last?
Yeah.
Okay.
And parks are 5.
Yeah, but that makes sense though, because what this parks department.
Now, it's forecasting, was that the word?
Yeah, and that's good. That's really good.
Wow.
Any other, any other suggestions for Logan?
No, I think that when we get the map, we can get together and maybe analyze and create some proposal just to donate.
Sure, and if you'd like for us to come back to another district advisory board meeting, we'd be more than happy to have more discussion.
I have a question. So I did some quick math on the infrastructure park project allotment. And you had mentioned that the majority of District 6 was in fact in low to moderate income census tract. But 15% of the allotted infrastructure projects went to District 6, which is majority low to moderate income. Whereas a significant investment was placed in District 1 over the 14 to 19 time period. Is there going to, is the shift, will there be a shifting focus from district to district, or is it meant to improve citywide? How is that decided and allocated?
So it's really about the districts advocating on what park improvements are needed in their specific areas. So we will allocate a specific amount for infrastructure improvements in any given year. And then we basically wait for the city manager to say, okay, here are some projects I'm hearing about that I think might be able to be used for this funding. And then we would then propose a specific project to city council, and then they vote on the allocations.
Who would be responsible for advocating for each individual district? Obviously, I know that we have a council member for District 6, but who would come to you with ideas of projects?
So neighborhoods can come to me with particular projects, and that's usually where they are, this are citizens usually who have, particular areas they're interested in.
It just seems that, I know District 1 is also, there's significant low to moderate income area as well, but it just seems like we're a district that such a large portion of it does need help. It does need work. There is issues in our district. It seems like more than 15% can be done.
So are you the city council rather than only approving what the city manager suggests gets fixed?
Yes, but we can suggest things to the city manager, and then he brings all that together and then makes a recommendation.
So what would be the time frame for that? So like if you were a neighborhood that wanted something, when would you submit your information, I guess?
Well, throughout this process, so we're in the process of creating the action plan for the 2020-2021 program year. We are putting a specific emphasis on infrastructure improvements in opportunity zones. That doesn't mean that if you're not in an opportunity zone, you can't.
But those are pretty,
Yeah.
Could you provide examples of what an opportunity zone is? Like a certain area of town?
Yeah, sure. So there's a part of downtown, I think part of the area where the state office building, where that redevelopment is going on, that's an opportunity zone all the way up to, I think, via Christie and then bordered by Kellogg. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but there's basically a square of downtown around that area. There's an area in Plainview that basically the borders of Plainview are an opportunity zone. There are opportunity zones by Wichita State and Fairmount, but I would recommend going to the Wichita Downtown Development Corporation website. They put on a lot of proposals for the opportunity zones, and our department was included in selecting the census tracts with the Economic Development Office, as well as Wichita State and some other community partners, and submitting the application to the Department of Treasury.
So we had, as a city, based upon what the federal government said would qualify as an opportunity zone, we had to identify parts of our city that we labeled as opportunity zone, then you had to have those approved, and then they are set by the federal government. So, like Toby said, we got to the Greater Wichita Partnerships site, and we also have.
I've seen it. I was asking for the
Yeah, so
Facebook Live video.
Anything else? What else do you need from us, Logan?
So that's the end of the first item. The second item, we don't have a PowerPoint for it, but we're just trying to solicit a grants review committee member. And so I passed out the schedule of what the meetings would be. These are tentative, but we've already reserved the room, so I'm pretty sure they're probably not going to change. And basically this person would be assisting and reviewing the request for proposal responses that we receive from our youth crime prevention and enrichment, our domestic violence shelter services. So I'm a little under the weather. And our home investment partnerships program, set aside funding, as well as our emergency solutions grant in conjunction with the COC. Last year's representative from this district advisory board was Matt Brown. Fortunately, I guess he's not here. Usually they'll speak a little bit about the process.
He moved to Topeka.
Oh, no. A little lost.
Yes. I think, Joel, you've served before,
Okay.
right? Denise, have you served before? Gregory, have you served before? Yeah, no, okay.
I don't have a desire.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, so that people have questions about it. You haven't served.
No, I'd like to.
You know, so if you have questions, did you serve, Sean? You served, okay, so these three, if you have questions about it, or someone would like to do it, certainly can.
It's really interesting if you ever wonder about the makings and the workings of where that money goes and how it's distributed. You're actually part of it, and grant writing, which I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, but yeah, it's really interesting. And it doesn't take much time.
What you need every 2 months.
It says the schedule right in front of you.
No, the meetings are all taking place in February. Wednesday, February 5th, Thursday, February 13th, and then Wednesday, February 19th. Typically during working hours, but the Thursday, February 13th goes a little bit past working hours so that hopefully members of the public can be able to attend that meeting. That's when you'll have the representatives from each of the agencies come and give their pitch for their programs.
And that's the extent of the commitment, right? Those 3 meetings.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yep, that's the
You're
extent
done.
of the commitment.
As long as I feel like it's green, that's right.
Fill out your grant form.
So James, you're,
I would be interested.
Okay, then I nominate you.
I'm on.
So nomination and second.
Last second.
Shall we vote?
Anyone else interested? All right, so we have a nomination for James and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you, James. Appreciate it. And is that all you need tonight, Dorothy?
That's all. I just need that form back.
Okay, all right. Thank you all. Okay, and I think, all right. I think she took her note. All right, issues of concern from DAB members? Anything?
There was one, the intersection at, on West Street, right where there's the railroad tracks, to and west. The concern was brought up, and I told her I would say something because my wife makes my dinner. She had concern with how, where the white lines are for where you're supposed to stop, how if you did appropriately stop right at that white line, half of your car is right next to the train track.
No, so they need to be, they're planning.
Shifting that to either before or fully after, but then you're running into the intersection.
Okay, so the stop lines, traffic stop lines. Okay.
Yes.
All right, any other issues of concern from, about neighborhood reports? Any neighborhood reports? Nothing? Okay, let's see, a couple of updates from me. I'll give you the popular annual financial report, so this is pretty good information for you. It's a lot easier to read than the big report, so take a look at that. Couple of items to report back to you on in terms of cases that you saw. So we saw a single family to two-family at 3320 West Elm, and we approved that. The DAB, you approved it 9-0, City Council approved that on consent agenda at 7-0. And then the former railroad right-of-way to CBD at 2nd and McLean, we saw that, and DAB approved it 8-0, and City Council approved it on consent agenda also. So those are the only ones that we've seen. The ones that were, thank you, Logan. I think the ones that have been a little more controversial, the car lot one at 13th and Broadway, 13th and Market. I think that one's coming to council either the 12th or the 19th. We were able to work with the developer a little bit on that. And I think what was recommended is the kind of the least amount of zoning changes as needed for the business to stay in business. So we'll see.
What does that mean?
Well,
Yeah, really.
if you recall, they were asking for all of that to be zoned LC, I believe, okay? And I believe what, I haven't seen the final report, but what I understand what's gonna come from the council is that the zoning at the corner of 13th and Broadway will stay as it is, and they'll stay grandfathered in with that car lot there. But they won't get, they're not now asking for upzoning. Okay, so they'll stay as limited commercial. The lot at 13th and Market, in order for them to use that as their office for the car sales, it has to be limited commercial. So they're asking for limited commercial zoning there, but no vehicle sales at 13th and Market.
Which is what we recommend.
Right, exactly.
So there's a house there right now?
Yeah, there's a house there, and that's what they, that house, they want to use it for their office.
Oh, okay.
But there would be no car sales on that lot. And then they'd have to change some of the landscaping and the fence there if they got the limited commercial zoning. So, yeah, it's pretty much what you guys recommended, but by the time it came out of MAPC, it had gotten a lot more zoning to it. So anyway, we worked with the developer. And then the other one is the car wash, the conversion of the car wash, and that one's still being, the developer's still looking at that one, so I haven't seen a report come out of that one at all. So I think those were the two kind of more controversial ones that you guys have looked at.
So we were gonna build a bike path in front of somebody's, a whole bunch of people's houses out to a park somewhere.
Yes, so we, tomorrow on city council, we will approve the funding for that.
You will approve it?
Yeah.
You don't vote on it?
Well, yeah, we vote on it.
Oh, but you already know everything. You already
Yeah.
know how
No, I mean,
vote?
well, we will approve it or not approve it, I guess you could say, yeah. So it will, so it's in the CIP, it's in the budget. We just have to approve the funding for that.
Good.
And the right-of-way acquisitions and all that kind of stuff, so. All right, let's see, did I have anything else? Oh, our next meeting, we do have a mid-month meeting because we have one zoning case. We have one zoning case mid-month, so we'll meet on November 20th, right here at 6:30.
Who does rails to trails? Does the city have anything to do with that? Is that all private?
It's federal.
It's federal?
Yeah, Rusty Trails is federal.
No.
Started out back, remember, a program called Ice-T.
Why did it take so long?
Well, railroads are hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're already gone.
Yeah, but they're still,
have the
yeah,
land.
they still own it and have the right to come back at any point. But the Red Bud Trail is a rails to trail, and the path out by Goddard, the Prairie Sunset is a rails to trail. So what, do you have a question on it?
No, I was just curious.
Oh. Yeah.
Thanks for all that.
The infrastructure funding has been reallocated to other projects down south.
From,
The federal, it was the federal government.
oh, I see. All right, anything else for the good of the order? We are adjourned.
What
Thank
date
you
is
all.
that? What date is Wednesday what?
November 20th. November 20th.